You know, from our very first breath to our last, and all those huge moments in between, like getting married or even getting divorced. These are things that connect us all as human beings. But have you ever stopped to think about what happens when they stop being just, personal moments and become these massive global industries? Today, we're going to dive into how the most basic parts of life have been turned into a marketplace.
This quote? Wow. It really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's this idea that the most fundamental parts of just being human have been neatly packaged and then sold right back to us. So we're not just living our lives anymore. We're basically customers in the economy of our own existence.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the surprising ways conflict gets monetized. Then, we'll shift to the industries built around our relationships. After that, we'll check out the price tags on birth and death. And finally, and this is the important part, we'll see how people are starting to push back against all of this.
All right, first up, the business of conflict. And I'm not just talking about armies and giant tanks you see on the news. This is about how violence, and even just the threat of violence, creates its own economy, from the global stage all the way down to your local neighborhood.
This is really the core question, isn't it? It gets right to the heart of the life economy. And the answer, well, it reveals this huge tension. Are the systems we've built actually designed to solve problems, or are they designed to keep them going for financial gain?
And the scale we're talking about it's just mind-boggling. In the United States, the proposed defense budget is on track to hit $1.5 trillion. And that's not just a number on a page, it's a massive river of cash that fuels the entire military-industrial complex.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating. Look at the two different ways this spending is framed. In the US, geopolitical tension is seen as a market catalyst. Their business models literally depend on conflict for long-term revenue. But then you look over at Canada. They're spinning it totally differently. They're using a $500 billion strategy as a national project, a way to build up their own industries and create jobs. So same spending, but two completely different reasons for it.
But look, this economy of conflict isn't just about these giant government budgets. It gets way, way more personal. This number, 53 per 100,000, that's Jamaica's homicide rate. And it's the entry point into a whole street-level economy where violence itself has become a product you can buy or sell.
And this slide just lays it all out. At the local level in the Caribbean, fear is a commodity. Gangs run extortion like a subscription service. The need for safety has created a private security industry that's literally double the size of the police force. And get this, even the prison system monetizes conflict, forcing families to pay hundreds, even thousands, a month just to support their incarcerated loved ones.
So from the battlefield to the front door, the pattern just keeps repeating. Let's shift gears and look at the price of partnership. These huge industries that have popped up around the moment we say I do, and well, the moment we decide we don't anymore.
Let's be honest, getting married has basically become a major financial transaction. Whether you're dropping 33 grand in the US or over 10 grand for a local wedding in the Caribbean, this whole wedding industrial complex of vendors and marketers has swooped in to take a cut of this one single life event.
But okay, what happens when it all falls apart? In Canada, the average cost to dissolve a marriage is $18,000. That's not just a fee. For a lot of people, it's a financial wall that can trap them in a situation they're desperate to escape.
And here's the real-world consequence of that. This quote from a Canadian business professor just nails it. It points to this crazy situation where couples are stuck together, not because of love, but because of money. The high cost of a divorce plus a crazy housing market means that splitting up is just financially impossible.
Okay, so we've covered conflict and partnership. Now for the ultimate bookends of our lives, birth and death. You'd think these would be untouchable, but both have been completely transformed from natural processes into highly structured and very expensive commercial events.
So, how much does it cost to be born? Well, it depends on where you are. In the US, it's a direct transaction. Boom, here's a bill for over $20,000. But in the UK, the birth itself is covered by the NHS, so the industry just gets clever. The cost is simply shifted to the nearly £8,500 families will spend on baby stuff in that first year. Either way, the industry gets its money.
And then we get to the final bill. This table breaks down the cost of an average American funeral. And honestly, it looks less like a final goodbye and more like an itemized car repair invoice. Every single piece, from the service fee to the casket, which can have a markup over 300%, is its own monetized transaction.
and it all adds up to almost 10 grand just for a basic service.
And it's a similar story of financial pressure over in the UK. When families don't have enough to cover funeral costs and the average shortfall is over £2,000, they're forced to scramble. They're draining their savings, racking up credit card debt, or borrowing from loved ones. The cost of dying is creating real financial hardship for the living.
So we've seen the data from conflict, to partnerships, to birth and death. But what's the actual pattern here? What's the thread connecting all of this? And maybe more importantly, are people just accepting it, or are they starting to fight back? In this last section, we're going to connect the dots and look at a growing countermovement.
You know, none of this happened by accident. There's a playbook for it. First, you create intermediaries. Think of wedding planners or funeral directors replacing help from family and community. Second, you perpetuate the cycle, because there's way more profit in managing a problem than in actually solving it. And finally, you financialize existence. A life event is no longer just a ritual. It's a financial product that might require a loan or an insurance policy.
But here's the hopeful part. People are finding ways to opt out. This slide is so great because it shows these little acts of rebellion. In the US, more families are choosing lower-cost birthing centers. In the UK, simple, affordable, direct cremations are skyrocketing in popularity. Canadians are using mediation to avoid expensive court battles, and in the Caribbean, people are turning back to susus, these amazing community savings clubs, to fund life's biggest moments completely outside the formal system.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world that seems determined to put a price tag on literally everything from birth to death, how do we protect and how do we measure the true value of the moments that are and should be priceless?